The November wind cut through Arlington, Virginia, carrying the bite of an early winter as Colonel Sarah Chen stepped out of her rental car. The Thompson family mansion stood before her, a testament to old military money and generations of service. Its colonial architecture gleamed white against the gray sky, American flags flanking the entrance like sentinels. Sarah smoothed her dress blues, checking her ribbons one final time. 20 years of service compressed into colorful bars across her chest, though she knew most civilians wouldn't understand their significance. The Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, bronze, the Defense Superior Service Medal, each one earned through sacrifice. Yet here she was, about to face her greatest challenge yet, meeting her fiancé Michael's family for Thanksgiving. "You've commanded battalions in Afghanistan," she whispered to herself, gripping her purse tighter. "You can handle a family dinner." The front door opened before she could knock. Michael Thompson stood there in his army dress uniform, his captain's bars gleaming. His face broke into that smile that had first caught her attention at the Pentagon briefing 6 months ago. "You made it," he said, pulling her into a quick embrace. "I was starting to worry the traffic got you. Takes more than DC. Traffic to stop me," Sarah replied, trying to match his enthusiasm despite the knot in her stomach. Michael had warned her about his family, old military aristocracy, he'd called them. His father, retired General William Thompson, had served in Vietnam and Desert Storm. His grandfather had been at Normandy. Military service ran in their blood like tradition runs in royal families. "They're going to love you," Michael said, but Sarah caught the slight tension in his voice. The foyer opened into a grand living room where at least 30 people mingled, their conversations creating a warm buzz. Sarah noted the military precision in the gathering. Older veterans clustered near the fireplace, younger service members by the bar, spouses and children filling the spaces between. "Michael!" A woman's voice cut through the chatter. "There you are!" Margaret Thompson approached with the bearing of someone who had spent decades as a general's wife. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her burgundy dress impeccable. Her smile was warm, but her eyes assessed Sarah with surgical precision. "Mother, this is Sarah," Michael said, his hand finding the small of Sarah's back. "Colonel Chen." Sarah extended her hand. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Thompson." "Oh, please, call me Margaret." The handshake was firm but brief. "Michael has told us so much about you, though he failed to mention how young you look. You must have joined straight out of high school to be a colonel already." Sarah maintained her smile. "West Point, actually, class of 2004. "How wonderful," Margaret said, though something flickered across her expression. "William will want to meet you. He's holding court in his study, as usual." As Margaret led them through the house, Sarah noticed the photographs lining the walls. Generations of Thompson men in uniform, from World War II through Iraq. She searched for any women among the portraits and found none. The study door was open, revealing General William Thompson surrounded by a semicircle of men, all holding whiskey tumblers. Even in retirement, he commanded the room. His voice boomed as he recounted some story from his time commanding the 82nd Airborne. "William," Margaret interrupted gently. "Michael's here with his girlfriend." The general turned, his steel gray eyes immediately cataloging Sarah's ribbons. His expression remained neutral as he stood. "Colonel Chen," he said, offering his hand. "Michael speaks highly of you. General Thompson, it's an honor. You were with the 75th Rangers." "I heard?" "Yes, sir. 2 deployments with the regiment before moving to JSOC. Impressive." But his tone suggested he was reserving judgment. "We'll have to swap stories later. Right now, Margaret's about to call us for dinner." As if on cue, Margaret announced that dinner was served. The dining room was magnificent, with a table that could easily seat 40. Place cards marked each spot with military precision. Sarah followed Michael, searching for their names. She found his easily enough, seated with his cousins and their spouses at what was clearly the younger generation section of the table. But her card wasn't beside his. "Sarah, dear," Margaret called from near the kitchen door. "You're over here." Sarah's heart sank as she saw her place card at a smaller table set up adjacent to the main one, the kids' table. Children ranging from 6 to 16 were already taking their seats, looking at her with curious eyes. "I think there might be a mistake," Michael started, his face flushing. "Oh no, this is right," Margaret said smoothly. "We always seat the girlfriends with the children. It's a family tradition. Only spouses sit at the main table." Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She'd led combat missions, made decisions that affected hundreds of lives, earned commendations from the Secretary of Defense, and now she was being seated with children because she didn't have a ring on her finger. "It's fine," Sarah said quietly, touching Michael's arm as he started to protest again. "I like kids." She took her seat between a gap-toothed 8-year-old and a sullen teenager absorbed in his phone. The 8-year-old, a girl with pigtails, immediately perked up. "Are you a real soldier?" she asked, eyes wide. "I am," Sarah replied, grateful for the distraction. "My daddy says women soldiers just do desk jobs," the girl said innocently. Sarah bit back her first response. "Well, some do, but I've done all kinds of jobs." From the main table, she could hear the conversation flowing. War stories, Pentagon gossip, discussions of military policy, her area of expertise, yet she was excluded, reduced to cutting turkey into smaller pieces for the 6-year-old who couldn't manage his knife. "What's that one for?" The teenager had put down his phone, pointing at her bronze star. "Valor in combat," Sarah said simply. "You were in actual combat?" His skepticism was obvious. "Afghanistan, 2011. Did you kill anyone?" "Tyler," his older sister hissed from across the table. "You can't ask that." "It's okay," Sarah said. "That's not really dinner conversation. But yes, I've been in firefights." More children started paying attention, and soon Sarah found herself fielding questions about everything from what MREs tasted like to whether she'd ever jumped out of a helicopter. Despite her humiliation, she found herself enjoying their honest curiosity. From the main table, she caught fragments of conversation. General Thompson was holding forth about the changing nature of the military, lamenting how traditions were being eroded. She didn't need to guess what traditions he meant. "Aunt Sarah?" The 8-year-old had apparently adopted her. "Why aren't you sitting with Uncle Michael?" "Well, sweetie, I'm not actually your aunt yet, but you're gonna marry him, right?" Sarah glanced at Michael, who was clearly uncomfortable at the main table, barely touching his food. "Maybe someday." "I hope so," the girl said seriously. "You're nicer than Christy." "Who's Christy?" "Uncle Michael's old girlfriend. She sat here too, but she didn't talk to us. She just looked at her phone and looked sad." So this was standard treatment for any woman Michael brought home. Sarah wondered how many had endured this initiation ritual. The meal dragged on. Every burst of laughter from the main table felt like a reminder of her exclusion. She helped the younger children with their meals, mediated a dispute over cranberry sauce, and even helped one boy with his math homework he'd snuck to the table. It was during dessert that everything changed. The front door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. Sarah didn't pay attention at first, focused on helping distribute pie slices to her young tablemates. "Sorry I'm late," a gravelly voice called out. "Traffic from Bragg was murder." Sarah's head snapped up. She knew that voice. Lieutenant General James Morrison strode into the dining room, still in his ACUs, looking like he'd driven straight from Fort Bragg without stopping. The 4 stars on his chest caught the light as he surveyed the room. "Jim," General Thompson rose, genuine pleasure on his face. "We didn't think you'd make it." "Wouldn't miss Margaret's turkey for anything," Morrison replied. Then his eyes found Sarah at the children's table. His expression shifted from jovial to confused to something harder. "Colonel Chen?" His voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "What are you doing over there?" Sarah stood, acutely aware of every eye in the room on her. "Sir, I was just... Why is my J3 sitting at the kids' table?" Morrison's question was directed at the room at large, but his eyes were on General Thompson. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Margaret was the first to recover. "Jim, we have a tradition. Girlfriends sit. Your tradition has my operations officer, the person who plans half the special operations missions in the Middle East, sitting with children." Morrison's tone was deceptively mild, but Sarah recognized the danger in it. She'd heard it in countless briefings when someone had massively screwed up. "She's Michael's girlfriend," General Thompson said, a edge creeping into his voice. "The tradition..." "Bill," Morrison cut him off. "Do you know what Colonel Chen did last month? She planned and coordinated the hostage rescue in Syria. You probably saw it on the news. Miraculous rescue of aid workers. That was her operation." He walked over to the children's table, his presence commanding despite the pie plates and spilled milk. 6 months ago, when we had that intelligence breach at Bagram, she identified and neutralized the threat before we lost a single asset. The SecDef personally called to thank her. Sarah wanted to sink into the floor. "Sir, it's really unacceptable," Morrison finished. "This is the officer who briefs the Joint Chiefs, who has a direct line to CENTCOM, who I trust with the lives of thousands of service members." He turned back to the main table. "And you have her sitting with the children because she's not married to your son?" Michael had stood now too, his face a mix of embarrassment and anger. "General Morrison, I tried to..." "I'm not talking to you, Captain," Morrison said sharply, and Michael fell silent. "I'm trying to understand how a room full of military officers thought this was acceptable." "Now wait a minute," General Thompson's voice had lost its jovial tone. This is my house, my tradition. Your tradition is outdated and disrespectful, Morrison replied. This isn't 1950, Bill. We don't segregate officers based on their marital status or gender. Jim, Margaret tried to intercede, her hostess' smile strained. Perhaps we could… Ma'am, with all due respect, I've been in the Army for 32 years. I've served with hundreds of officers. Colonel Chen is in the top 5 I've ever worked with. She's not just Michael's girlfriend. She's a decorated combat veteran, a strategic planner, and frankly, she outranks most of the people at your main table. The silence was deafening. Sarah could see the calculations happening behind various eyes, career implications, social dynamics, bruised egos. She's my direct superior, Morrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of his stars. I report to her on operational planning, half the missions your grandson brags about. Captain Thompson? She planned them. She decided which units to deploy, which assets to use, how to minimize casualties. He looked directly at Sarah. Colonel, would you join me? I need to discuss the Kirkuk situation, and I'd rather not do it at the children's table. Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to flee, to escape this mortifying situation, but she recognized what Morrison was doing. He wasn't just defending her. He was making a statement about the modern military, about respect and recognition regardless of gender or marital status. Of course, sir, she said, standing. Bring your pie, he added with a slight smile. Margaret's pumpkin pie is worth the drive from Bragg. As Sarah picked up her plate, the 8-year-old tugged at her sleeve. Are you leaving? Sarah knelt beside her. I have to go talk about work, but thank you for keeping me company. Will you come back? Sarah glanced at Michael, who looked stricken, then at his parents, whose expressions were unreadable. I don't know, sweetie. She followed Morrison to the main table, where a space was hastily made beside him. The conversation was stilted, awkward. Morrison calmly began discussing operational matters with Sarah, drawing her into the kind of high-level strategic discussion she excelled at. Gradually, others joined in. The younger officers, freed from the previous social constraints, began asking her about her experiences. One major admitted he'd studied her tactical assessments at Command and General Staff College. A lieutenant colonel mentioned he'd implemented procedures she'd developed for inter-service coordination. But the damage was done. The Thompsons remained largely silent, their traditional worldview shaken. Michael tried several times to catch Sarah's eye, but she kept her focus on the professional discussions. As the evening wound down, Sarah excused herself to use the restroom. In the mirror, she saw an accomplished officer, ribbon straight, bearing proud. But she also saw the woman who'd been deemed unworthy of sitting with adults because she lacked a wedding ring. When she returned, Morrison was waiting by the door with her coat. I think it's time we headed out, Colonel. Early morning tomorrow. Sarah nodded, grateful for the escape. As they prepared to leave, Michael intercepted them. Sarah, please, can we talk? She looked at him, really looked at him. He was a good man, she knew, but he'd let this happen, had probably let it happen to Christy and whoever came before her. Not tonight, Michael, she said quietly. I need to think. My parents, they're just traditional. They meant exactly what they did. Morrison interrupted. And you let them. Michael's face crumbled, but Sarah was already walking out the door. The cold air hit her like a slap, clearing her head. Morrison walked her to her car. You okay, Colonel? I will be, sir. Thank you for… that. I didn't do it for you, he said gruffly. I did it for the Army. We can't afford to lose officers like you because some people can't let go of the past. As Sarah sat in her car, watching Morrison drive away, her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Please come back. We can fix this. She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. Some traditions needed to die. Driving through the quiet streets of Arlington, Sarah thought about the little girl at the kids' table who'd asked if she was going to marry Uncle Michael. The answer, she realized, was no longer maybe someday. It was simply no. The Pentagon at 0600 was Sarah's sanctuary. The corridors were still mostly empty, the building humming with the quiet efficiency of the night shift, handing over to day personnel. She'd been coming in early for the past 2 weeks. Ever since Thanksgiving, finding solace in the predictable rhythms of military bureaucracy. Her office on the 3rd floor overlooked the parking lot, a view that wasn't much but marked her position in the hierarchy. The nameplate on her door read, Colonel S. Chen, J3 Operations Planning. Inside, the walls were sparse. A few commendations, her academy diploma, a photo of her squad from Ranger School. Nothing personal, nothing that suggested a life outside these walls. Sarah powered up her computer and immediately dove into the Kirkuk situation Morrison had mentioned at dinner. It wasn't actually urgent. He'd used it as an excuse to extract her from the kids' table, but she'd made it urgent, throwing herself into work with the single-minded focus that had carried her through her darkest deployments. "Ma'am," Sergeant First Class Williams knocked on her doorframe. "General Morrison wants you in briefing room C at Oro 700. Joint meeting with CENTCOM. Tell him I'll be there." Sarah didn't look up from her screen. Williams hesitated. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, you've been here before me every day for 2 weeks, and I get here at 0530. Your point, Sergeant?" "Just making sure you're taking care of yourself, ma'am." Sarah finally looked up. Williams had been with her for 3 years, through 2 deployments. He'd earned the right to gentle concern. "I'm fine, Williams. Just busy." He didn't look convinced, but knew better than to push. "Yes, ma'am. Also, Captain Thompson has called 3 times this morning already." Sarah's jaw tightened. "If he calls again, tell him I'm in meetings all day." "Roger that, ma'am." After Williams left, Sarah turned back to her work, but her concentration was broken. Michael had been relentless. Calls, texts, emails, even flowers delivered to her office. Each attempt at contact just reinforced her decision. He didn't understand that the issue wasn't the seating arrangement itself, but what it represented, and his failure to prevent it. At 0655, Sarah gathered her materials and headed to the briefing room. She knew the Pentagon's maze-like corridors by heart, could navigate them in her sleep. The building was filling up now, uniforms from all branches creating a river of camouflage and dress blues. Briefing room C was already half full when she arrived. Officers from various commands were setting up laptops and shuffling papers. She recognized most of them. The Pentagon was surprisingly small at the senior levels. Colonel Chen, Major General Patricia Hayes from CENTCOM nodded in greeting. "Heard you had an interesting Thanksgiving." Sarah inwardly groaned. Of course the story had made the rounds. The Pentagon's gossip network was more efficient than its official communications. "Just a family dinner, ma'am," Sarah replied neutrally. Hayes smiled knowingly. "Jim Morrison doesn't drive from Bragg for just any family dinner. Good on him for calling out that antiquated bullshit." Before Sarah could respond, Morrison himself entered, immediately commanding the room's attention. He caught Sarah's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod before taking his seat at the head of the table. "Let's get started," he said without preamble. "We have a developing situation in northern Iraq that needs immediate attention. Colonel Chen, brief us on your assessment." Sarah stood, pulling up her presentation on the main screen. For the next hour, she was in her element, analyzing force movements, proposing response options, fielding questions from officers who respected her expertise. This was where she belonged, where her worth was measured in competence and results, not marital status. "Excellent work as always, Colonel," Morrison said as the meeting concluded. "Stay behind a moment." As the room emptied, Morrison gestured for her to sit. He studied her for a moment with those piercing eyes that had seen too much. "You look like hell, Chen." "Thank you, sir. You always know just what to say." He almost smiled. "When's the last time you went home before 2200? "I've been busy." "You've been hiding." He leaned back in his chair. "Look, what happened at the Thompsons was inexcusable, but you can't live in this building." "With respect, sir, my personal life affects your professional performance. You're one of my best officers, but you're running on fumes. Take the afternoon off. That's an order." Sarah wanted to protest, but she recognized the tone. Morrison rarely pulled rank, but when he did, it was absolute. "Yes, sir." "And Chen?" He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, you deserve better than someone who won't stand up for you." After he left, Sarah sat alone in the briefing room, staring at the blank screen. She knew Morrison was right. She'd been using work as a shield, just as she'd done after losing her squad in Afghanistan, after her father's death, after every personal crisis that threatened to crack her carefully maintained armor. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Michael. "I'm in the lobby. Please, just 5 minutes." Sarah felt a flash of anger. He was in her workplace now, invading the one space where she still felt in control. She deleted the message and stood to leave, but her phone rang immediately. The front desk. "Ma'am, there's a Captain Thompson here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." Sarah closed her eyes, counting to 5. "Tell him I'll be down in 10 minutes." She took her time, stopping by her office to lock away classified materials and check her appearance. If she was going to do this, she'd do it on her terms, in her uniform, in her building. The Pentagon lobby was bustling with visitors, contractors, and military personnel. She spotted Michael immediately, standing near the security desk in his dress uniform. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes matching her own. Sarah. He started toward her, but she held up a hand. Captain. She kept her voice professional, aware of the many eyes and ears around them. Let's take this outside. They walked to the memorial garden, a small oasis of green in the midst of concrete and security barriers. The December air was sharp, but Sarah welcomed the cold. You haven't returned any of my calls, Michael said as soon as they were alone. I've been busy. For 2 weeks? Sarah, please, we need to talk about what happened. What's there to talk about? She turned to face him fully. Your family humiliated me, and you let them. I tried to fix it. When? When did you try to fix it, Michael? When your mother assigned the seating? When she explained their tradition? When I was helping 6-year-olds cut their turkey while you sat at the adult table? His face flushed. I didn't want to make a scene. But it was okay for me to be the scene? Sarah's voice rose slightly. Then she caught herself, glancing around. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I've briefed the Secretary of Defense. I've received commendations from generals. And your family had me sitting with children because I don't have your last name. It's just how they are. And you're okay with that? Michael ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she once found endearing. No, I'm not okay with it. But they're my family. I can't just... Can't what? Tell them their traditions are outdated? Stand up for the woman you claim to love? I do love you. You love the idea of me, Sarah said quietly. The accomplished officer who looks good on your arm at military functions. But when it came to choosing between their approval and my dignity, you chose them. That's not fair, isn't it? She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a saved message. Your mother texted me the day after Thanksgiving. Want to hear it? Dear Sarah, I hope you understand our family traditions aren't personal. When Michael finds the right woman to marry, she'll be welcomed at the family table. Until then, we maintain certain standards. Michael's face went pale. She sent that? You didn't know? Sarah laughed bitterly. Of course you didn't. Because you don't see it, Michael. You don't see how every tradition is just another way of saying I'm not good enough. I'll talk to her. I'll make her apologize. I don't want her apology. I wanted you to see it without being told. I wanted you to be the one who said this is wrong before General Morrison had to shame your entire family. A group of officers walked past, and they both fell silent until they were alone again. I'm sorry, Michael said finally. I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have insisted you sit with me or left with you. I was a coward. Sarah felt some of her anger drain away, replaced by exhaustion. Yes, you were. Tell me how to fix this. Please. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was genuinely remorseful. She could see that. But she could also see the patterns that would repeat. Every family gathering, every tradition, every moment where he'd have to choose between institutional comfort and doing what was right. I don't think you can, she said softly, because fixing this would mean fundamentally changing who you are, and I don't think you're ready for that. I can change. Can you? Can you really tell your father that his worldview is outdated? Can you tell your mother that her traditions are discriminatory? Can you choose me over them, not just once, but every time? Michael's silence was answer enough. I didn't think so. Sarah straightened her uniform. I need to get back to work. Sarah, wait. He caught her arm gently. What about us? Are you really going to throw away 6 months because of one dinner? She removed his hand carefully. It wasn't just one dinner, Michael. It was you showing me who you are when it matters. And I can't build a life with someone who won't stand up for me. So that's it? We're done? We're done. The words were harder to say than she'd expected. I'll have your things sent to your BOQ. Sarah turned and walked back toward the Pentagon entrance, her heels clicking on the concrete with military precision. She didn't look back, didn't see Michael standing alone in the memorial garden, didn't let him see the tears. She blinked away. Inside, she badged through security and took the elevator to her floor. Williams was at his desk, looked up with concern as she passed. Ma'am, everything okay? Everything's fine, Sergeant. She paused at her office door. Captain Thompson won't be calling anymore. Understanding dawned on his face. Yes, ma'am, for what it's worth. His loss. Sarah managed a small smile. Thank you, Williams. In her office, she closed the door and leaned against it, allowing herself one moment of vulnerability. The photo on her desk, the only personal item she'd allowed herself, showed her and Michael at the Army Ball 3 months ago. They looked happy, she thought. She looked happy. She walked over, picked up the frame, and placed it face down in her bottom drawer. Then she pulled up the Kirkuk assessment and got back to work. Her phone buzzed with a text from General Hayes. Heard Morrison gave you the afternoon off. Want to grab coffee? Pat. Sarah considered for a moment, then typed back, Coffee sounds good. Pentagon City? See you at 1400. And Chen? Good riddance to bad rubbish. For the first time in 2 weeks, Sarah genuinely smiled. She might have lost a relationship, but she was remembering who she was without it. Colonel Sarah Chen, strategic planner, combat veteran, and worth more than any tradition that tried to diminish her. The morning sun was finally breaking through the Pentagon's windows, casting long shadows across her office floor. Sarah turned back to her computer, to the work that had never let her down, never asked her to be less than she was. Her desk phone rang. Colonel Chen, she answered crisply. Ma'am, this is Major Harrison from J5. We have a developing situation in Syria that needs your expertise. Can you join us in the ESCIF? On my way, Major. Sarah gathered her materials, straightened her uniform one more time, and headed for the door. She had work to do, lives to save, missions to plan. The kids' table was behind her now, where it belonged. As she walked through the Pentagon's corridors, she noticed something different. Other officers nodded with what seemed like extra respect. A female lieutenant colonel she barely knew stopped her to say, Heard about Thanksgiving. Good for you, ma'am. Word had indeed gotten around, Sarah realized. But instead of being mortified, she felt something else. Vindicated. She wasn't the only woman who'd faced such treatment. Wasn't the only officer who'd had to choose between love and self-respect. In the SIF, surrounded by maps and intelligence reports, Sarah felt herself settling back into her skin. This was her world, where competence mattered more than convention, where her worth was measured in lives saved and missions accomplished. Colonel Chen, Major Harrison greeted her. Thank God you're here. We have a situation. As Sarah dove into the crisis at hand, she pushed thoughts of Michael and Thanksgiving dinners to the back of her mind. She had more important things to worry about than someone who couldn't see her value. Outside the Pentagon, the world continued its relentless spin. But inside, Colonel Sarah Chen was exactly where she belonged. Not at the kids' table, not at anyone's side table, but at the center of operations, making decisions that mattered. The afternoon would bring coffee with General Hayes, a woman who'd blazed her own trail through the military hierarchy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new operations, new chances to prove that respect was earned through action, not granted through association. And somewhere in Arlington, the Thompson family would continue their traditions, seating girlfriends with children, and wondering why their son couldn't seem to keep a strong woman. But that was no longer Sarah's concern. She had a job to do, a career to build, and a life to live on her own terms. The kids' table had taught her one valuable lesson. She'd rather eat alone with dignity than feast with those who couldn't see her worth. The SIF door sealed behind her with a soft hiss, closing out the rest of the world. In here, there were no traditions except excellence, no hierarchy except competence. Sarah pulled up the intelligence reports and got to work, finally feeling like herself again.